Are you looking for the best Apple laptops? In this video, we will look at some of the 3 best laptops on the market. Before we get started with our video, we have included links in the description, so make sure you check those out to see which one is in your budget range. Starting at number 1. Apple MacBook Pro 14. The best Apple laptop we've tested is the Apple MacBook Pro 14. Before we get into more details about this laptop, it's worth noting that Apple no longer sells the M1 model, at least, not in a new condition, and has replaced it with the M2 version. The newer model is identical to its predecessor in design since the changes are only internal. The upgrades include a faster SoC, Pro or Max, HDMI 2.1, Wi-Fi 6E, and increased memory support of up to 96 GB. Other than that, everything else is the same. So, let's talk more about it. The 14-inch MacBook Pro is a premium mobile workstation and the smaller of the 2 Pro models with Apple's new design and mini LED display. It's designed for professional workloads like video editing, 3D graphics, etc. Apple's SoC, M1 or M2, has no problem handling demanding tasks, and they're incredibly power efficient, resulting in all-day battery life. The mini LED display is sharp, bright enough to combat glare, and produces deep, inky blacks. Plus, it has full DCI-P3 coverage and superb factory calibration, so you can fully rely on it for color work. Ports include 3 USB-C/Thunderbolt 4 ports, an HDMI, a full-size SD card reader, and a high-output headphone jack for difficult-to-drive cans. If you need more screen space and don't mind a larger device, the Apple MacBook Pro 16 is the obvious choice. It's identical to its 14-inch sibling but with better-sounding speakers and longer battery life. The only downside is that it's more expensive. As mentioned, Apple no longer sells the M1 model, so it's best to go with the newer version unless you can find a good deal on an M1 model through a third-party seller, marketplace, or even Apple's refurbished section. Number 2. Apple MacBook Air 13. If you only perform light tasks like text processing, web browsing, and video playback, get the Apple MacBook Air 13 instead, one of the best MacBook Airs Apple has ever made and the successor to the popular Apple MacBook Air 13. This model sports a new design, a slightly larger and brighter display, a better 1080p webcam, and a faster M2 SoC. Like most MacBooks, it has a spacious keyboard and a gigantic touchpad. Battery life is excellent at around 10 hours of light use. Unfortunately, it only has 2 USB-C ports, and, like its predecessor, it can only output a video signal to a single external display. If you want a bigger screen for multitasking, there's good news. Apple has released a 15-inch MacBook Air. It's essentially the same device as the 13-inch M2 MacBook Air but with a 15.3-inch display and better speakers. You can see it on Amazon here. Before we move on to our budget pick, we need to talk about the Apple MacBook Pro 13, the odd middle child. The latest model was released simultaneously with the M2 MacBook Air. However, aside from an SoC upgrade to the M2, it didn't get a redesign, meaning it has the same design as the M1 MacBook Pro with thicker bezels and the controversial Touch Bar. Despite having Pro in its name, this model is more of a MacBook Air with active cooling, fans, than a true Pro device, as it lacks the processing power and the high-end features of the MacBook Pro 14 and 16, like Apple's mini LED promotion display. It's a good option if you want slightly more processing power for the occasional intensive workload, otherwise, get the M2 MacBook Air. Number 3. Apple MacBook Air 13. If you're a little put off by the price of the Apple MacBook Air 13, you can still buy the older Apple MacBook Air 13, M1, 2020. It's also one of the best MacBook Airs that Apple has produced and the first to have an Apple-made chip inside. Although this is our budget pick, it's only considered budget because it's the most affordable model in Apple's laptop lineup. There's nothing budget about this laptop. It feels as premium as the picks above, so you're still getting an exceptionally well-built device that provides a great user experience. As for performance, its M1 SoC can still go toe-to-toe with newer CPUs on the market, so even though it's nearly 3 years old now, it's still plenty fast for general productivity tasks. Compared to the newer M2 MacBook Air, most of the trade-offs are pretty minor, like the design, webcam, and SoC, so unless there's a feature you want on the newer model, this is a great alternative that'll save you a good chunk of cash.